All right, this video is definitely geared towards people who are new to music production. I want to break down some real simple tips for you in terms of what I think are the most important elements to start with pop music production or hip hop or whatever. And that is the drums, the bass, and the chord instruments. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through making a really simple drum beat, talk about the most important parts of the drum set. Then we're going to talk about chord instruments and making up a little chord idea or chord progression. And then we're going to look at a bass line that goes with those chords, but also goes with the bass drum. It's a really important aspect of creating a bass line that you may have never thought about. And then we're going to add one more chord instrument. We're going to add the electric guitar. So if you're new to this kind of stuff, this will really help you out. We'll go through it as quick as possible, and then I have other videos that I can link to in the description that go into much more detail on these kinds of things. And if you want to see something else, let me know in the comments. I'll be using a few products that have been sent to me by the manufacturers. That's why it says paid promotion at the beginning, but nobody's paying me to make the video. And I use these products because I love them, but that's a whole other discussion. So let's get into the music basics, the most important elements, and then get you going on creating your own music with whatever music production software you're using. So I'm doing this in Cubase, but this will work on any software, whether it's on your computer or a mobile device, whatever. So I feel like drums is a great place to start because we're establishing some kind of groove. And I'm going to use Battery for this, a drum program by Native Instruments, but any drum software will work. We're going to use this Hazy Days expansion. I've got a video on this one. So all you do in Battery once you have expansions installed is type in the name of the expansion and all the kits will pop up. So we'll go through and we're going to find a drum kit. All right, I've already found a kit. I'm digging. This is the fourth one down called Bat+Prod kit. And just got a really nice kick drum, snare drum, and then a hi-hat, closed hi-hat, and an open hi-hat. So that's all we're going to worry about for drums for right now. If you think about kick drum and snare drum, you can really think of them as kind of like a stomp and a clap. They're actually very similar in what we're doing with a kick drum and a snare drum. And for the most part, kick drum and snare drum are going to be alternating. So there are some styles of music like 4 on the Floor where kick and snare hit at the same time. But for the most part, it's kind of a back and forth thing. The most basic back and forth thing that you could have would be kick, snare, and that's on beats 1, 2, 3, 4. So we set our time signature to 4/4, and we're going to set our tempo to something like 80. Let's set it to 80 and then turn the click on and see what that feels like. So kick, snare is kick on 1 and 3, snare on 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, let's put that in. All right, doesn't get any more basic than that. The next most important element is the hi-hat. And the hi-hat is that thing that can or it could be swung. We're not going to worry about that too much today, but let's just put in some really basic hi-hats in there. And for our hi-hats, you can hear them going in between and at the same time as the kick and the snare. So those are going quarter notes, hi-hats going eighth notes. We could draw those in if we want. And I have a drum video where I show the drum editor in Cubase, but not every program has a drum editor, so I'm just going to use the MIDI editor, the normal MIDI editor here. So we're going to enter in some hi-hats, which is this A flat or G sharp right here, and we're going to set them as eighth notes. So if I hold Option and drag this out, now we get, or Alt on a PC, now we get our little eighth note hi-hats. So there we go. It's feeling a little Billie Jean or something like that, right? If you want to make this a little bit more exciting, we could go and set our grid to a 16th note, and then we could start putting some kick drums right before a snare, a kick drum right after a snare, and let's have a listen to what that sounds like. Yeah, that sounds cool. What I might do here is get rid of this kick and maybe move it over, something like this. That sounds pretty good. Let's just go with that. There we go. I'm going to resize this and duplicate it. And with Cubase, you can just hold Option and drag this little guy right here. and it'll make a copy for you. Or you can select it all and press Command D or Control D on a PC. So I do a lot of teaching and have been teaching forever. And my students often want to start with guitar. So they'll come into the studio, or they'll have a friend come into the studio, and they'll turn a click track on and they'll say, all right, go ahead and play. And they try playing to a click track, and it's almost impossible for most musicians who have never played to a click track to stick to a click track. So they come in, they try and play the guitar, and it's all over the place. So what I would recommend for those situations, even if you don't want drums in your song, put down a basic drum beat. Even if it's just kick on 1 and 3 and snare on 2 and 4, you know, you're getting that kick, clap, much easier to play to as any musician, you know, guitar, piano, or whatever, than a beep, 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 beep. At this point, we could turn the click off if we want. And what I sometimes do is take one more chunk at the beginning, and let's just maybe leave the hi-hats in there giving us the beat. So we could start like this, and then come in with our instrument. So you give yourself a bar at the beginning of your project so that now we could turn the click off. Before I go any further, the other thing to think about with your drum programming basics, and I do have that drum programming basics video. One thing to think about is a drummer wouldn't hit the hi-hat the exact same way every time. So we're just going to take every other hi-hat down just a little bit in velocity, maybe something like this. So we'll take that guy down as well. There we go. So now we've got a little bit more variation. Okay, that sounds pretty good. We'll just leave that for now. So now we go to the next instrument, and at this point you might want to start with something chord-based, or you might want to go to a bass line. I'm going to start with something chord-based so that we can get some kind of chord progression. So maybe it's some little piano riff that you come up with, maybe it's a loop that you found, or you get somebody to come in and play a little thing. At this point, I still don't want to go to my guitar just yet. I want to give myself a little bit more to play to. So we're going to go to this little guy right here, the Mini Freak. The Mini Freak's really neat because when you buy the hardware, you also get a software version, and the software version is an exact representation of what's on the hardware. And the coolest thing is you can create a patch with your virtual instrument and then dump it onto the actual hardware, or vice versa. You can make a patch on the hardware and then dump it onto your computer. And there are very few synthesizers out there that actually do this kind of thing. So let's go to the browser on this one. I'm going to type in lo-fi. We're going to see what we get for that. Let's try Trance Piano. I play in C minor way too much. Let's go to D minor because it's the saddest of keys. So I'm going in now and I'm just refining some of the notes, listening to what I played and then going, you know what, might be fun if I do something a little bit different here. So I'm just moving my notes around that I just kind of improvised. So this 5th and 6th bar is going to be a little bit different than the first ones that had a repeating thing. It's kind of taking us a little bit different territory. The 4th repeat of that chord progression is going to wrap us up so we can go back and repeat the whole thing. So that's it. We've got a chord progression that repeats. It goes for 8 bars, which is a very typical thing. And we're going to make a new instrument track. And now we're going to talk about bass. So for this one, let's just go through all of my favorite products. We'll go over to Omnisphere, and I'm just going to click on the folder and go over to Synth Bass. Let's go to the soft and warm category. Those are kind of my favorites. I just like that super low end. Okay, the warm, simple bass, that's just beautiful. Let's go for that. We're going to really focus on the relationship between the bass drum and the bass notes. So I play bass as well, electric bass, but I'm just going to use a synth bass on this one. And bass can either be an instrument that's really connected to the bass drum, or bass could be an instrument that's doing something totally different, still giving us that kind of those fundamental notes of each chord. And there's no right or wrong way to do that, but we're going to go the simple route for this little video here and try and get our bass instrument to lock to the bass drum that we have in our beat. There's different ways of doing this, but you need to look at where your bass drum is hitting, on what beat it's hitting, and try and hit your bass instrument at the same ones. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll have the bass note hit, and then whenever the snare drum hits, you cut out the bass drum. That can also accentuate the groove. So sometimes it's when you're not playing the bass note that things get even cooler. So first thing I'm going to do is just glue these drum kits together, and with Cubase, Alt-click. When you click the glue tool, everything gets glued from that part on. Now I can see it all here in my editor, which is going to be useful to me because I want to watch where that's hitting and just try and play along with it. Here we go. But what if you're not a keyboardist? Well, one thing you could do is slow your tempo down to practice this. So let's go down to 55. And then slowly speed things up as you get more comfortable with it, right? That's a brilliant part of all of this kind of music production. And it's also a really nice part about not recording any audio tracks yet. If it's all virtual instruments, you can slow it down to your heart's content, slowly speed that up, you know, get faster and faster at it, or you could just record it at that slower tempo. So you record it slower, now we go back up to our tempo. So we've got a bass line now that's sticking to the bass notes of our chord progression, following that sort of left-hand thing that I was doing. If you don't play keyboards, a really quick way for you to get this, if you had somebody play something and you're still, you know, you're not really comfortable playing a bass line yourself, hold Option or Alt on Cubase or Command-C, Command-V on any program, and copy the keys down. And what we're going to do is we're going to keep just the low note of this little chord progression. So I'm going to get rid of all of these, and that's it. There, in our first 2 bars, is our chord progression. You know, of course, this isn't going to work every time. You know, it depends on what your keyboard has played, but this is just a really easy way for you to extract the notes of the progression into a bass line. Click this Edit and Place button on drums, and watch what happens now. I can see where the bass should be hitting. So it should be hitting right here and right here. And like I said before, maybe cut out where the snare is. So I'm going to keep cutting the notes up and then get rid of it where the snare is. Well, the bass drum hits right there. Let's have this bass hit right there. And then another bass drum right there. And I'm holding Option and clicking to cut. Or you could use the scissors tool, but on Cubase, Option or Alt is just a brilliant way to cut this up. Now I've got bass note hitting right there on the right note. And then we go to the next one. We're going to cut right there. And then we're going to cut out on the snare drum. And then the last note, we've got another bass drum hit right there. Same thing, cut out where the snare drum hits. So I have a snare drum hitting clean right there, and snare drum hitting clean right there, and another snare drum hitting clean right there. There we go. Now let's have a listen to that. All right. What I would normally do in this situation is play this myself, add some variation, you know, make it a little bit funkier. But one thing you could do is, if you're not a keyboardist, is to start moving the bass notes up or down an octave or up or down a fifth. And we'll just try a few little things out with that. So I'm going to take this first note and we're going to shift it down the octave. Shift arrow down on Cubase takes it down the octave. We could do the same thing. Take that one down and then take this one down the octave and then back up. And then now we could do something different. We could take this one down the octave and this one up the octave. And then, like I said, a fifth is another thing that you can do with these notes, is to take a note up or down to the fifth of the chord. So it's either up a fifth or down a fourth. That's maybe a little too much music theory. But if it's a C, we'd go up to a G. So let's take this one up to a G. bass player would often do something at the end of an 8-bar phrase. So let's go up the octave, and then let's do a little melodic thing. Something like that. Getting a little fancy here. Okay, that sounded great. We got our bass line. Didn't have to play anything in. So the last element now is to put maybe one more chord instrument, one more rhythm instrument. So I'm gonna grab my old electric guitar, we'll plug it in, and then after that, you wanna work on your melody. So maybe we'll do a different video where I talk about melody. You want it to be something that's kind of floating over top of this chord progression. But at this point, you have something that you can sit there and hum along to and try and come up with some sort of melody. So for the guitar track, I've got some chords figured out, and we're just gonna lay in some really basic chords, and I'm gonna use Guitar Rig 6, a really great guitar amp simulator. So for this, I'm just gonna go to pop, and we're gonna try looking for some nice clean patches, maybe with some delay on it. That sounds really nice and clean, but I just want a little bit of delay on it. So I'm gonna go over to components, and we're just gonna add some delay and echo. Let's just go to the twin delay and just chuck this down. I'll just double click on it. For this one, we can set the time to be musical according to our project. So I'm gonna set the time to be much slower than it is right now. Let's go to 16th. Let's try a dotted 8th note. I'm just gonna play the first chord, slide down one note, and then go to a B flat major 7 chord and a G minor 7. And that's it. And I'm just kind of going with the rhythm of the beat here. I'm going to pan the guitar to the left and the keys to the right. And just kind of balance things out a little bit. So to sum it up, we've got the drums, we've got the bass instrument, and we've got the chord instruments. And in this case, 2 chord instruments. And they're panned opposite sides, really thinking about the beat that we've set up and the chord progression that we've set up. So lots to think about, but a good place for you to start. So hopefully this was helpful for you. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell if you're new here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.